a lot of the biggest problems that crypto solves are not that relevant if you grew up in a wealthy country. Like in the United States, like most
Amen.
bank accounts, not everybody, we could do better, but most people have access to digital cash, digital payments.
Yep.
In Southeast Asia, that's not true. In Latin America, that's not true. In the entire global South, that's not true. Right? In Colombia, which is where half my family's from,
Yep.
18% of the population has a bank account.
Hello, and welcome. I'm your host, Sergey Kiklevich. I'm the co-founder and CEO of YOLO, and I have an exciting guest on another episode of On-Chain Attention Podcast today. His name is Phil Hedayatnia. He is the co-founder and CEO of Airfoil. It's an exciting company. These guys have helped to build and design products for companies in Web3 and AI industry. Their headcount there is over 50 people, and they work with over 250 different projects. We're going to have an opportunity to hear about a lot of this. They've worked with who's of the industry, and they have also created themselves as a high quality provider. There are some very interesting differentiating factors about them, but Phil's got a lot of examples and stories for us. We're going to have a dynamic conversation. He's also an angel investor himself, an activist and evangelist for the crypto and Web3 industry. Phil, please introduce yourself. Hello and welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the kind introduction there. I appreciate it. I never know what to do in these intros because I'm just like, oh, thanks so much. That's really kind of you. But thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
A little context on my side. I've been a product designer for about 10 years now. About half of that has been in crypto, and specifically working on Airfoil. I originally started the company. I used to be part of an early stage accelerator in SF that was fintech focused. And while there, I would float around a lot of different projects and work with them in my capacity as an individual designer. And eventually that became advising a lot of companies on who to hire, right? Which contractors to bring in for specific things, which design firms to talk to. And when we started, I think we weren't purely focused on crypto. I think it just happened that I had a lot of friends that were diving into the space and needed some help. But it actually was more around how we could help technical founders find really great design talent. Because when they would go and try to find individual kind of like contractors who could plug into what they're doing, if you're talking about founders that don't have a background in design, they don't necessarily know what to look for either, right? And so it's actually really tricky, right? Everyone's portfolio's got some name on there that you know or that you recognize, but understanding who can come in and provide advising and support beyond just actually executing the work is a tricky and difficult thing. The flip side was when I would refer folks to work with agencies that had a very good brand name, there then was the question of, okay, which partner are you working with there? Are they going to prioritize your work over the contract that Uber just gave them for $500K a year? And the other thing is that they would just execute without, in my view, it's kind of doing half the job, right? Like half of the responsibility that a designer has is the actual execution. It's actually just creating the visuals, creating the brand book if you're a brand designer or something like that. But half of it is the art direction. It is the collaboration, the brainstorming, the research. And that's all stuff that I think a lot of firms would skip. And so that's why we started Airfoil. Now, there's a more fundamental reason why they would skip that, though, in the effort to also just like create, also just bluntly, an offering that founders can afford. And that is because it's obviously costly. It takes a lot of time. But it's because the way most firms work, given that demand varies a lot for design. When markets are great, it's up here. But when markets are not so great, it can bottom out quite a bit. Is that you don't really want to have that much full-time staff. So you end up having a couple creative directors that are spread very thin. You get a lot of ICs that then go and execute. And the result is that you can only reserve the creative director's time for the highest paying projects. So the core kind of innovation that we tried to push forward in the early days was we wanted to make sure that we could have the largest full-time in-house team as possible. And so we sort of said to our clients, if you're willing to take on some of that risk with us, we're going to bring our margins actually lower than a traditional firm would, but that's because we've got that certainty. So we said, we'll do work on retainer as opposed to just fixed price, fixed scope. And the longer that retainer minimum amount is, the lower we'll bring our rates accordingly. So at the end of the day, if you hire us for a year or more, then
Hmm.
we're not making that much money, but I know that that person's time is taken care of. And then we'll have a mixture of long term and short term. The short term stuff is higher margin, and the long term stuff is lower margin. And the result was we were able to scale up our team. Today, we do a combination of branding, so UI UX, or sorry, for logos,
Hmm.
books, typography, 2D and 3D illustration, motion graphics, merchandise. We do UI UX, which is about half of our headcount, and we do engineering as well. We have a full stack engineering team with front end focus. We a lot of times the outcomes that we provide to our clients are not just the screens in Figma, but it's a completed design system on the front end,
Yeah.
or just the completed front end. The only reason, though, we've been able to scale as we have, and we're about 45 now across the company, though, is because we've had so many clients stay with us for multiple years, whether it is working with L1s and L2s. Very recently, I mean, we've worked with the team at Solana, the team at Near, among
Hmm.
others, or it's working with early stage founders who choose to keep us on for a long period of time. And whatever it is that they need to hire for but haven't brought in house yet, whatever it is that's kind of that next thing they need to add to their team, there's probably someone at Airfoil can do it, or some way that we can come in to fill that need for them. Um, Maybe the other thing that's kind of interesting about us
Hmm.
also that we are a very global company. So I'm calling right now from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I live in Singapore. I'm American. I go back and forth between the US and
Yep.
Southeast all the time. We have about half of our team in North America. We have about half of our team in Asia, and we have a couple folks in Europe. But one of the unique kind of superpowers that that gives us is that we're able to create these teams that combine having somebody in a North American time zone working with a North American team
Yeah.
with another designer they're collaborating with who's in the opposite time zone. We can do fast handoffs, but it also means, for example, when we're doing things like merchandise, I can go and talk to the manufacturer, right? I can go and feel stuff in person and verify its quality. And though there are a lot of design firms, I mean, everywhere in the world, in every market,
Yep.
in the US, certainly there's quite a lot. There are certainly less in this region. And so crypto is a very global thing. Some of the best, at least in my view, some of the best companies in crypto over the past few years have come from Southeast Asia and East
Yep.
Asia, have come from all over the world. And so the ability to service these clients and prepare them and set them on their way and raise their chance of success, there's an element to that outside of just like we've been able to build a business doing it, where it's also very fulfilling to work with founders, support them, and just like help them win in ecosystems that may be a little bit less friendly than Silicon Valley, where I
Hmm.
started the first half of my career.
That's really cool, and it speaks to the quality of the work that you guys are doing at Airfoil. And given your last remarks about the international footprint and being in different parts of the world, I actually have a follow-up question to that. Um,
Yeah,
for those people maybe who are listening who are thinking that they want to start something or are already in the process, they could be all around the world too. The question when you build an international team and they're virtual predominantly, right, and they're spread
yeah,
across different continents, what's your not necessarily secret, but how do you manage the culture? How do you keep people on the same page in terms of
yeah.
unifying them into a one team, one body, the feeling of togetherness, the community, the team, versus just a bunch of random people all around the world?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that when we first started to scale, it was kind of in that pandemic period
Hmm.
where there was a lot of narratives out there about you can hire from anywhere. Great talent is not, actually centralized in these handful of top cities, and you can just build an entirely remote first company. And the weird thing is, like, I don't actually believe that's entirely true. I think that the reality is somewhere in the middle, where like there is it is very real that there is a massive efficiency bonus to having folks in office with you in person or being in the same time zone. There are other advantages that come with being remote and global. So the reality is somewhat mixed. we tend to have people in some of the same cities around the world. We have a large team in Singapore, in KL, in Seoul, in Ho Chi Minh City, in Toronto, Vancouver, and San Francisco.
Hmm.
And the result of that is that North American staff have all met each other in person, and our Asian staff have all met each other in person, and they often frequently meet each other in person.
That's amazing.
They've gone and done trips together and stuff like that. We've done an offsite where we brought the whole team globally together. These are all things that I think are really important. I think that when you meet somebody in person, you get a good understanding of how to communicate with them and how to both like overreact, avoid overreacting, avoid underreacting. And so I think the remote teams can work great insofar as there's a very intentional effort to create those opportunities for people to understand each other. I think the other aspect of it, though, is
Hmm.
understanding differences in culture and communication. I grew up in the U.S. I'm pretty blunt overall in the way that I kind of chat internally. I've lived in Canada as well. I'm going to make a very blunt, broad brush statement and say that I don't think Canadians are as blunt as Americans are.
I
Um,
think that's true.
I think so. I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. These are simply differences, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think Singaporeans are more blunt than Americans are.
Really?
Um, I think, well, that's been my experience.
Wow.
Maybe I'm wrong,
Okay, okay.
but there's all these differences, and differences can be perceived incorrectly. And and if you understand the tendencies that people are going to have and how they communicate, how they work, how they
Hmm.
collaborate, based also on the cultures from which they come, then you can find ways to diffuse situations quickly. I recall when we were doing our big team offsite, it was the first time that some of our European and Western colleagues were in Asia and
Hmm.
meeting with some of the team there, and including some of the Singapore team. And I remember hearing these grumbles from a few people on the Singapore team, and I was like, about some of the colleagues that they met, and I was like, "What's going on? Like, what's happening?" And they were like, "Well, we took them for coffee, like 4 times, and they didn't pay any of the times. We went and paid for them." And I was like, "Did you ask them to pay?" And they're like, "Well, no, no, of course not. But they should know. They should go. And I paid the past couple times, and they should pay the next one." And I'm like, "Guys, like that was a thing in my family because my dad's Iranian, my mom's Colombian. That was not a thing where I grew up in the Midwest. Like we assume if you offer to pay, like you mean that you offer to pay.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of those little things that don't seem like they would be like massive impasses, but if you just know as a manager to expect them, then when those situations come up, you can diffuse them very quickly and say, "Hey, this is not a big deal," right? Like here's a quick resolution. The other thing we had to do was set standards around communication. So eventually we said, okay, we can do a lot to try to make sure that everyone gets along great together. And honestly, like that's probably one of the things I've been happiest to see
Hmm.
develop over the past 5 years. It's been like really great, like collaborative atmosphere, despite us being remote. But also we had to set expectations. We had to say, like, for example, in design critique sessions,
Hmm.
mm, when I was starting my first manager job back in SF, I remember my boss at the time told me, he's like, when you give feedback, you need to give the compliment sandwich. You say this is really good, and you say this is what can be improved, but this is great. And when we wrote down kind of like here's how we communicate at Airfoil, I said, look, like we're all here because we respect each other, and everybody here does really great work in their own way, and otherwise you wouldn't be here. And we like hopefully we have that trust with each other, but the compliment sandwich is banned. If there's a critique session, I never want it should never be personal. It should never be how could you possibly do this? But it should also never be compliment filled. It should be here are all the places where we can get better. Let's workshop it together. It should be majority critique, majority constructive criticism, and maybe at the end we say some nice words and compliment what's great just to like set things on a good pace.
Hmm.
But you have to say that and say like this is who we are and how we work. If that's not the environment you want, then go where it's the right environment for you. And if that is the environment you want, welcome. We're very happy to have you. I think there are a lot of companies that had to go through this shift over time.
Mm-hmm.
For us, I think the good thing was we saw that shift happen very early in our history. So we never had a moment where we had to like go and communicate that to our staff, and that was a shock. We worked with our staff to create that, and as a result, it's been a relatively kind of like drama-free.
That's fantastic, man. Like to whoever is listening or view or watching this, and if you're run a business or you're going to run a business, take notes of this. This is the gold. It seems like, oh yeah, you just described me how you guys work, but that's the stuff that makes or breaks companies. It's the people. Same thing with, I had a member from Hacking Team on a podcast not that long ago, and he was talking about cybersecurity in the Web3 space. It's still the people that break, that break security. The vulnerability is not the technology itself for the most part. It's the people. Same thing here, communication styles and all kinds of other issues. This is really good stuff, Phil, that you're sharing here. And so thank you very much. And I want to ask you a bit of a technical follow-up to this. You guys are in different places around the world. Did you have to go through a variety of communication tools that the team basically uses to make sure that they're communicating with each other? If so, what did you end up settling on, and maybe why, if you can speak about that? Like what communication tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we use Slack internally, and there's actually
Mm-hmm.
two kind of main software tools that we use aside from, of course, Figma.
Mm-hmm.
Slack and Basecamp, and there's some reasons behind both. So the sales team, as well as myself, we used a lot of Telegram, of course, because folks in
Mm-hmm.
the space like
Yeah.
use Telegram every day. I use Telegram with my family. I use Telegram with my girlfriend. Like I use Telegram for
Yep.
everything. But at the same time, I don't think it's an appropriate workplace communication tool.
I
It
agree.
involves individual and personal accounts, which means that we don't have visibility into conversations that are happening. It's a problem. And if, let's say, that a
Mm-hmm.
client does something unbecoming to somebody on our team, then they delete the messages. What can I do, right? I have nothing.
Yeah.
So things like message logging and retention are very, very important. The other thing is there are a lot of clients that have worked with us for which there have been restrictions on what we can say at the time that we're working on the project.
Yeah.
I remember we were working on some projects around the Solana Saga phone when it
Mm-hmm.
launched. That was one of the stipulations was like no one at Airfoil can talk about the project until it's announced. Um, and so the only way that we're able to kind of guarantee that is also using secure channels for communication.
Yeah.
Um, and there's been a lot of places over the years where that's been very, very helpful. There was even one case where we had to cut a contract because we began to become suspicious about the client. This is back when we took anon contracts. We do not do that anymore. If I don't
Mm.
know the real identity of the people we're working with, we don't sign the contract. But
Nice.
that was a case where we then had to go through our logs and records, and we could tell from our logs that the client was not in the country that they said they were. And that was for us the reason that we cut that.
Mm.
Right? So I'm keeping that relatively vague, but like it's
Good.
helpful to have that kind of like OPSEC in place. It also means that our staff and our employees feel more comfortable and don't feel like they're as exposed, which is always a great thing to do. So we create like a joint Slack channel between us and the client. And then we add in everybody from our side who works on the project, so there's full transparency.
Yeah.
And the reason we use Basecamp is maybe a bit more complex, but it has to do with the way we think about project management.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite book on project management is called Shape Up, and it was written by Ryan Singer. I was part of the Basecamp team. We've literally given it hardcover copies of the book to staff when they join Airfoil. And I think Ryan's ideas on how to uh, how to communicate to a designer what they need to work on, how to delineate the difference between product and design, where product's job is to understand function and design's job is to understand form. It's a free book. I recommend everyone to read it.
I'm
Basecamp,
adding it to my list already.
good, absolutely. Uh,
Absolutely. Thank you.
it, it's Basecamp as a tool was built around that philosophy, and so it's really important when we were first studying remote first organizations, and I was trying to figure
Mm-hmm.
out what is a common point between ones that are very well run, whether we're talking about GitLab or whether we're talking about Automatic, the folks behind
Mm-hmm.
WordPress.
Yeah.
WordPress uses Slack today, but for many years, they actually ran their entire company off of a WordPress installation called P2. They built a blog framework where every day the way you would communicate your work and communicate with your colleagues was by writing long form blog posts. And GitLab has had a version of that for years. One
Hmm.
priority that I keep seeing is that you need to have people do a very good job of long form writing to really succeed in a remote first environment. And so Basecamp as a tool doesn't have online symbols, so you don't know when people are online. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically built like a text editor, but the result is that people write multi-paragraph responses to things and give their full set of opinions, which, given the number of time zones we have to work around, is a really invaluable thing.
Wow. Again, to everybody listening and watching, take notes. This is gold from somebody who has been working and figuring this out for a while and deals with a multinational team. Because we're all going to bump into this if we have people spread around the world, and communication, it makes or breaks teams. I know that a lot of the stuff that you're speaking have already seen and witnessed myself with our team as well. And we're in a process of constant evolution and finding different tools. So thank you for the book. It was Shape Up, right? That was the name?
Shape Up, yeah, and it's
Awesome.
literally free, so everyone should read it.
Everyone should read it. Absolutely. Okay, great. Let's keep going. I have a question about maybe a little bit more specific about some of the things in Web3 and some trends. Having worked with more than 250 projects at this point, different protocols, different layer one, layer two, and all the derivatives in crypto space. What would you say, standing here in 2025, it's April 2nd, 2025, and looking out into the future? Um, are you noticing any trends in how Web3 products are being designed? So, from a design perspective, has anything changed? Is there something going on that you can point out today? And where do you see the design of products in Web3 evolving into the future?
Yeah, yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is that protocols are just getting a lot better at obfuscating away crypto on ramps and off ramps and kind of like crypto entirely.
Mm-hmm.
There's a product we worked on recently called Time.fun that just recently relaunched on Solana. And basically, it's a time market. So you can go and buy people's time, redeem it for video calls, for texting. Kind of like anybody who's a crypto celeb can be on Time.fun and make some money, but also
Mm-hmm.
kind of cameo esque. But it's also a good way to, like, if you want to get a product in front of Mert, in front of Toli, you can DM them directly. They can donate that money to charity. And it's gotten reasonably good adoption. But one of the decisions that we made when we were adapting the V1 to V2, or V1 was
Mm-hmm.
originally built on Base, it was one, to find every place where we were using the kind of internal currency of time.fun and just change that to dollars. So you would buy people's minutes and then redeem them. So everything would be denominated in minutes. But
Mm-hmm.
then it was confusing to people because they're like, wait a second, I own these minutes. And so I have 60 minutes that I've bought of Sergey's time. But
Mm-hmm.
then when I go to redeem it for a video call, it gets me 10 minutes of his video call time. Like, that's kind of confusing.
Mm.
And so what we did is we just moved away from that entirely. We are like, dollars. Let's denominate everything in fiat currency because people will understand and get that.
Yeah.
And still, we'll ask them to buy a certain amount of minutes of their time, but we'll make it just feel like buying a stock. Um, that's been one shift where I've seen a lot of protocols just do that a lot better. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing, which we also did in Time.fund's case, is just assuming that new users will use MPC wallets. In Time.fund's case, we're using Turnkey right now. When you go to sign up for an account, you put in your email address, you create a Turnkey wallet. You can go load that with assets from your Solana wallet if you'd like,
Mm-hmm.
but it's independent. You can't just connect your wallet directly. And I know that creates some friction for a lot of existing users.
Mm-hmm.
But what we found is, one, having email address as a means to re-engage users is just a really important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, like wallet-based ad networks haven't taken off the way we maybe wished that they would have. It also gives the user more control. They're concerned that if they go connect with their ledger, for example, that what if the site gets compromised, and does that impact their self-custodial wallet, or stuff
Yeah.
like so it just makes designing that whole experience a lot easier. So it's a bit of additional friction for people that already have a Phantom extension on their desktop and would be like, hey, I wish I could just one click authenticate. But for the vast majority of users that are coming who are new to crypto,
Hmm.
it's no different for them. It just makes the whole onboarding experience feel just like any other app. This is actually something I've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah.
I gave this talk like 2 years ago at Solana Breakpoint, where I laid out kind of a lot of problems with design and
Hmm.
web today. And one of the points that I made was that why do we have all these apps that don't have onboarding flows, right? You go to a lending protocol, and instead of seeing a landing page or any information, you just see the protocol and everything's zeroed out. And you have to click connect wallet and connect, and then kind of figure your own way around the application. And what I said back then was that onboarding flows are not just for connecting usernames and passwords. It's for leading, it's for informing the user what they're about to experience. It's for getting them excited about what they're about to see. It's for collecting information that's relevant to you as a builder, to understand who they are, where they come from, why they're here. And like, just because we may not need the username and password piece doesn't mean we should throw out the rest of why those things exist. Every crypto protocol should have a landing page. Every crypto protocol should have an onboarding flow. That onboarding flow can be shorter, but it shouldn't be non-existent.
This exact point was made on one of the episodes recently to me. And it was, in a sense, it was that we as a crypto industry, as a Web3 industry, have not yet figured out the UX UI solution or challenge or the problem. And when we do, the adoption, the user adoption is going to skyrocket because we're still a decade into this and more at between 5 and 6% adoption globally. Only the kind of the more tech savvy people, the more risky, the early adopters, the people who are tech savvy are playing in this field. And to your point, if I can land on a page and it'll tell me in simple terms, how, what is this all about, how to connect my stuff versus I get in there, I heard good things about a project or a protocol. I get there and I have no idea what to do. Maybe I have some idea of what to do, but it's not easy to navigate. It's not seamless. So yeah, this is the stuff that I think will ultimately serve an important role to attract more and more demand into this space, which that means that this industry will double, quadruple, and beyond. It's still in its early stages. Interesting stuff. See, like, and it's I think your perspective of somebody who's in the design of products and building systems that help the average user get a more seamless and easy experience is so important here. So I appreciate that, Phil. I really do. And I think people around the world, if like they could be sitting here and watching this and be like, yeah, because I remember my first experience of it's about 5+ years ago, starting my first wallet, making that first transaction. My goodness, man, I was sweating. I was like, well, what all these protocols, all of these little things, and the number of steps. I
Yep.
say if we can get down to 5-ish from where we are right now, that's going to be a leap. And when we get to a 2 to 3 clicks, boom, game changer. Because one click, maybe. To this point, have a side question. What do you think the role? What role do you think the developing AI technologies are going to play when it comes to solving this challenge and its interaction or intersection with crypto, blockchain, Web3? What do you see from the world of AI? Because you work with projects there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there's a lot of hype around this in the space. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've definitely seen some key use cases that make a lot of sense. And I do think that this technology
Mm-hmm.
is going to affect crypto quite significantly. But at the same time, the number of projects that are either outright scams or just trying to capitalize on the AI wave in crypto is insane. Just
Yeah.
just insane. So maybe I'll start with what's not going to be the case. I am honestly very bearish on the idea that near term people will use AI agents to manage their wallets. I just don't, I haven't seen anything yet that's been that substantive in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's sort of the like, we're going to create like trusted execution environments to verify that AI agents are acting independently. And that way, if an AI agent is tweeting stuff on Twitter or an X that we can verify that it actually came from them and they're not shilling something they don't want to shill. And I'm like, but we're still talking about whether or not an AI or a person or whoever is shilling a token, on whether or not they're fairly shilling it. It just doesn't, like, it
Mm-hmm.
does not make sense to me, right? And like, and this is something that has frustrated me a lot about the space, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this for 5 years. The space has been kind of coming and going and improving for now well over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have thought by now we'd be further along on the adoption curve, to be honest.
Agreed.
I get
Agreed.
frustrated when I see projects that are just capitalizing on these hype cycles so quickly. What I have noticed, and what we've worked on some recent projects in, is one, I do think the trading bots are taking off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was true in traditional finance, right?
Correct.
You can say trading firms have been doing that stuff for years, right? So it made sense that now you're just going to see a lot more of that in crypto. That'll make sense. There are some really great companies that are utilizing AI to provide traders with better data. A good example of that, also a Singaporean company, is Alpha AI, which an awesome team, and they've built a really really great tool with great UX to like do sentiment analysis on top of public data, help
Mm.
understand which tokens are doing well. I think that's definitely a use case. What I'm excited about though is
Mm-hmm.
ability to utilize agents to make payments, potentially going forward. That's an interesting use case, and also to utilize AI to better protect users from fraud, from connecting to insecure sites.
Mm.
Um, Potentially also uh, and I would be hesitant about utilizing a smart contract that was actually coded using an AI tool. But I think that it will make it so much easier to build applications where if the smart contract layer can be handled and very well audited by a human, but if we
Mm-hmm.
can build front ends around those so much faster, which I absolutely believe is happening, right? It'll just become so much easier to build, and a lot of tooling that crypto applications lack that Web2 applications have in droves. I think that AI is helping to equalize that, which has been really exciting. There have been projects recently that we've worked on where
Mm-hmm.
we've worked and done this with the consent of clients, of course, but where we've basically said we believe that we can utilize AI to speed up our process. We even used Lovable in a recent project, which I was very skeptical about when
Mm-hmm.
came to me and said, "We believe we can build this site much faster using Lovable." We then delivered it in half the time, and
Wow.
it like it was good. The code was good, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is awesome!" So
Yeah.
that's the stuff that I'm really excited about. Like, let's make it easier for people to build software. It is scary because it's going to have implications to our industry. Like what I generally say about it is there have been all these efforts to train models to just create UI. I am a bit skeptical that you're going to be able to just have a model that will just spit out a completed product design. But what I do think you can do is I think you can increase the output of any given product designer many times over. That has an impact on our industry if we think about agencies, because if every designer becomes 5 times more efficient, I think the demand for designers is not going to go up
Correct.
5x, right? But we see this as a challenge of like, as long as we continue to focus on developing talent internally that can be holistic designers, that can guide product direction, that do a lot more than just pixel pushing, as long as we make sure that we remain on the cutting edge, then we'll be okay. But at the same time, we just think about the majority of design freelancers in the world, right? The majority of
Mm-hmm.
people in this career, they don't necessarily even have the ability in their jobs to be that creative. And I do worry about the way in which these tools will impact their livelihoods. And maybe decrease market demand for stuff people do for a living.
Yeah, I mean, two sides to the coin. One is evolutionary, and you cannot stop it. And when you have a professional and you give them the tools that are letting him or her do the types of things that it took them X and now it takes less, and on top of that, quality improvement, creativity explosion, new ideas, new ways to execute, fantastic. But yeah, that means that the total number of people working in that field will likely decrease. And it's happening globally. Like, we talk about it all the time that in the next 2 years, it's not unreasonable to see close to 400, maybe even more million people displaced around the globe from their existing jobs due to what's happening in AI all across, now talking all industries. Lawyers, doctors, it will touch everybody, not just the tech industry.
This actually was a huge reason that I got into crypto in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
The first job I ever had, and this was when I was in high school, I interned for an organization that was building the first letter grade based or non-letter grade based academic transcript in the United States.
Okay.
And so, and I was very certain I want to go to like education reform and very passionate about that. But the reason that I was passionate about that to start with was I don't remember the study in particular, but there was a study that basically looked at all American jobs and found that about 70% of workplace jobs could be considered quote unquote non-creative jobs, right? Jobs that rely on rote memorization or repetition. And these are things that even before the recent kind of surge in AI development, these are things that are highly easy to automate.
Correct.
And so if we were to see, and this was a decade ago now, but if we were to see AI improve enough, and you were to wipe out 50% of jobs, 40%, 10% of jobs, wipe out 10% of jobs in the wrong places, you could destabilize an entire economy. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very real to me that after the death of the steel industry and car manufacturing and all these domestic industries in the US, the last six-figure job in so many of the communities around where I grew up was truck driver. It was a job that paid very, very well because it's difficult and hard living. And if you automate that, you knock out the last remaining six-figure job in a lot of these towns, the towns will die, right?
Yeah.
So the reason that crypto was so interesting to me was it was like, is there finally a way to give credit to people for the work that they do and the output that they do? Can we make it easier for people to invest in other people, right? It boggled my mind that right near where I grew up, there would be all these payday lenders charging 200% APR. And I was like, is there not a way for us to verify using some sort of software that the person will likely get paid on Friday and give them that money on Wednesday? If 200% APR is what these payday lenders are offering, then why not, instead of me investing in stocks, why don't I just invest in like providing people who need it? And that's what got me interested in this idea of permissionless capital markets. Like the only way that we as societies and communities can adapt to the changing world as there's all these technological shifts is by creating permissionless capital markets. It's by we have to move faster as the world does, and crypto is kind of the way that I saw that I could be involved, at least to some degree, in helping that transition happen.
Wow. Yeah, you're hitting some very important macro issues here and highlighting them. And it just resonates, man. I talk about this all the time. I have conversations with other people like yourself that they also bring this up. And if I may ask you this, because you've been fantastic in explaining all kinds of things already today, to those people that have, for whatever reason, not at all, interacted with the world of blockchain, crypto, Web3, tokens, right? I'm trying to use different names, right? Because they are almost synonymous and different people use them differently. But I've recently spoken to somebody who is a very savvy person, an investor, very, tech savvy, marketing, digital marketing savvy, and he's older, right? He's over 60 years old, but like a dynamic individual. And to him and a lot of his peers, you say Web3, they say dark web. You say crypto, they're like, oh, scam, Silk Road, drugs, like the stuff that we saw early on left such an enormous dark stain in people's minds that they have been completely sealed off from even trying or
Yeah.
exposing themselves to this. Is there anything from your experience that you would say or you would share that could address some of the fears and anxieties and concerns and stigma on the Web3 space, crypto space?
Yeah. That's a really great question. Uh, the first thing that I would say is, even just like before what I would say to them, what I would say in this conversation
Yeah.
is that blaming the user doesn't make sense. And I think that if the only use cases of the technology that have been presented to people are use cases that are about how do we speculate and gamble on stuff, then people are going to say, well, that's what this technology is used for. That's
Yeah.
what it's good for, right? Have told this story before, but one of my favorite clients who ever worked with was Drip on Solana, which is a digital
Mm-hmm.
collectibles platform on Solana. And the reason that I fought so hard to work with you and the team and was very grateful to work with them is because NFTs themselves, to me, are some of the most interesting use cases of crypto. The
Couldn't
ability to
agree
verify
more.
that you own something is there's so many things you can do with that, right? You can
Absolutely.
make it so that, what if all of us as employers agreed that when we gave accolades to staff, they could save them as a digital credential, they could take it with them to their next job, and as a bonus, we could all learn more about the people we want to hire, right? Like that'd be great. And how do I know that it actually came from their boss? How do I know it wasn't falsified when I'm forgetting the exact statistic, but I think it's
Mm-hmm.
almost half of resumes include falsehood. Right? But there's
Yeah.
all these cool applications, um, but when I would explain that to people, even if they bought the argument, they would say, "But what I've seen NFTs used for is flipping pixel art for $10,000. So all that sounds great, Phil, but like
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, so why do I believe you?" And they're not wrong, right? So
Yeah.
with Drip, reason I thought Drip was so fascinating from the beginning was Vibu's pitch was these NFTs will be worthless. We're going to airdrop them for free. We're going to build a Web3 Patreon where there's a record of you having been an early adopter on chain, but where there is extremely limited value to flipping those NFTs. And instead, you want to hold those NFTs because they entitle you to different experiences. And when you like an artist's work, you can tip them. You can provide them what are called droplets on top of the NFT you received. And it became the first NFT platform, in my view, to flip the script in that way. It
Mm-hmm.
became the top NFT platform in Solana, and it spent 2 years in the top 10 apps on the Solana blockchain. And seeing that go from like 0 to 1 and seeing people embrace it and really use it, right, was it just incredibly rewarding because I could finally go to people and say, here is a use case
There
where,
you go.
you know, hundreds of thousands of people are coming into using this platform with no intention of making money. They're doing it because the tech is valuable. So that's the first thing I would say. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing I would say is that a lot of what you just described, right? And people saying, wow, it's good for buying drugs or the dark web or all that. Crypto is just so much not the dark web, right? Like I was just reading about the story a few hours ago that Deal, the global HR company, right, installed a spy in Rippling. I don't know if you heard about this. It's a crazy story,
No,
right?
don't tell me.
It's so I mean these are two rival kind of global HR companies,
Mm-hmm.
and Deal paid a guy to be in the Irish office of Rippling, or sorry, yeah, Rippling, and then feed information back to Deal. Like insane story. Everyone should Google it, look it up. But I read through the lawsuit, and one of the things they allege is that the Deal team made payments to this spy using crypto because they thought that the payments would be untraceable. Well,
That
turns
is
out
the dumbest thing you could ever say.
the blockchain records are now in the lawsuit, right?
There you go.
So it's funny that people don't get that, but like the exact opposite is true. But I actually think there's another reason, which is
Yeah, wow,
that
that's
yeah,
hilarious.
some of this stuff, which is that a lot of the biggest problems that crypto solves are not that relevant if you grew up in a wealthy country. Like in the United States, like most
Amen.
bank accounts, not everybody, we could do better, but most people have access to digital cash, digital payments.
Yep.
Um, in Southeast Asia, that's not true. In Latin America, that's not true. In the entire global South, that's not true. Right? In Colombia, which is where half my family's from,
Yep.
18% of the population has a bank account. If I'm in Vietnam, a country that has 100 million people, where 5% of the population works in tech, where every single year they see crazy high economic growth, I've observed that. I've spent a lot of time
Yeah.
in Ho Chi Minh City, especially, and you see tech companies thriving, the city growing at such a fast pace. You have all the right ingredients to have a super thriving, globally competitive economy.
Hmm.
When you go to the bank and you say, I want a multi-currency account so I can accept USD, they say, can you please put in a minimum balance of 20,000? And like, that's in a country where the median income is 675 a month, right? So like, thank God the Vietnamese dong is not that bad of a currency. It doesn't deflate or it doesn't inflate super rapidly. That is a very big problem in Latin America. But it is incredible to me how the majority of people in the world live in countries with unreliable currencies, unreliable financial systems, and for which even access to the dollar via a stablecoin is meaningfully better than what they have. And so,
I was just about to ask you about that. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you. There you
I
go.
see, like, I get why an American is like, why can't I use Venmo? But the point that I make to Americans on this is that there's a reason, like, I don't hear the same level of skepticism about crypto in Southeast Asia that I hear in the United States,
Yeah.
full stop. And more builders should come out here and talk to folks here, see these real use cases, and maybe just build for people that need the help the most.
Hey, preaching to the choir, literally. I speak to being an American company, building a marketing platform that is has a stable coin based reward system, just transparent, understandable, that bridges the gap between the wealthy countries, the US, and then distributing that to the users all over the world: Southeast Asia, Turkey, Middle East, Africa, um, obviously Latin America too, where people are experiencing tremendous pain from the strength of the US dollar that we printed a lot of just because we wanted to. And then overnight, people in those countries woke up and they are poorer because they did not get deposits. They did not get checks from the government during COVID. They didn't get nothing. And people in the US and European Union, they did. But if we understand where technology is taking us, that the value of an online user, if it was disproportionate, like Western a user here and the rest of the world here, the rest of the world is, because of crypto, is creeping up and leveling the playing field. For me, it doesn't matter where my project is going to take off, if it's in Indonesia or in Zimbabwe, for all I care. It doesn't matter. If that's where it starts and it grows and captures or catches fire and spreads across the world, what does it matter? The traditional thinking here is what needs to be challenged. So thank you for these examples that you're bringing up, and even mentioned the stable coin and everything, because um, I do see the same opportunity globally, that these international countries where there's a lot of innovation, where people are getting more and more educated, where because of knowledge being online, because now of machine learning and the type of help that I can get from my virtual assistant that is non-human but has access to information equally, whereas in the past access to information was also not equal.
Yeah.
So I think earlier in our conversation or pre-podcast, you mentioned just this trend about equalization, that crypto is giving companies, cultures, countries around the world, and people there a much more equal opportunity in the future, in the coming future, as we develop, than it used to be in the past. Do you want
Yeah.
to add anything to that?
I would say, I mean, first of all, like it's been so cool to see so many leading crypto companies come out of Southeast Asia, but not just Southeast Asia. I mean, come out of Europe, come out of
Hmm.
Africa, come out of Latin America. And I think it's like I love Silicon Valley. Even if time to time I shit on it, but I love San Francisco. I spend a lot of time there to this day, and I think that it's one of the most incredible places for any founder to go build a company. But I think the biggest kind of Achilles heel of SF, which most of the time doesn't hurt SF, but I think sometimes does in a crypto context,
Hmm.
is that the US can be a quite insular country. We're a very diverse country, but we also don't pay attention to the world that much. And that's been a through line across this time that I've split between the US
Yeah.
and Asia has been realizing that companies that I think of as commonplace that everybody knows in this part of the world in the US, people are just completely unaware of. Um, so, so I think that like it is a major advantage for crypto founders to be more worldly and to have a greater understanding of the global market. I think that teams that are outside the US oftentimes can do so in a better way. And there's certainly been protocols that we've worked with that have played those advantages. I think about, for example, Sega Finance, CEGA, right?
Hmm.
For which Arisa Toyosaki is an incredible founder. She's maintained her social profiles in English and Japanese for many years.
Hmm.
And a lot of early users of Sega came from the Japanese market, where a lot of their direct competitors had no presence in that local market.
Mm.
Turns out it's a very valuable market. So the ability to be global and think globally, I think, really helps there. Um, the other thing, and this comes back a little bit to the importance of building in crypto,
Hmm.
is that if we don't build for a global audience, no one will. Um, a few years back, Citibank, which was one of the largest foreign banks in Asia, the same
Hmm.
Citibank you see in the United States,
Yeah.
announced that they were selling off their entire retail business to UOB in Singapore, in Asia, except for Citigold, the high net worth product. And on, I believe, one of their earnings calls, their CEO expressed it as, we make so much money from our high net worth product that if we're going to choose where we invest a dollar, I'd rather invest more of it into winning the high net worth customer than investing it in a retail presence for everyone else in Asia. Like, I make more money that way. So, in other words, a bank literally said, we're going to give away our customers because we don't want them, because there's other things we could be doing with our time and money that make us more. When you turn finance into something modular where anybody who can code can be a part of a financial system, what it also means is that you have far lower customer acquisition costs. There's always somebody who has enough of an incentive, enough of a profit incentive to go after an emerging market. You don't need to wait for the banks to get around to it, because I think that if anything, if you look at uh, the what percentage of the population in the entire global South and virtually
Hmm.
every country is unbanked to this day, it's remained relatively static over the past 20 years. The banks are not coming to solve this. If we don't solve this in crypto, my view is no one will, and so we got to take it upon ourselves to do so.
Hey man, this is really cool. I appreciate you making that strong of a point here. Before we run out of time, there's something I want to ask you about your additional involvement. You are part of SG Builders and Super Team Singapore.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about those roles entail and how you've been engaged in that ecosystem and in that community.
Sure. So, I mean, SG Builders has been around now for 3 years, and
Hmm.
it's a completely kind of non-for-profit, volunteer-led effort here in Singapore to just create a great community around founders. Help them, attend dinners every week, hang out with other
Hmm.
people, meet other people, connect local founders as well with other global communities. Great communities around Asia like Bujidao, like ETHKL, etc. But part of it also speaks to a difference that I noticed when I got to Singapore versus
Hmm.
SF, where I was before, which is that there's a tremendous openness in San Francisco. People are always meeting each other. I think you can criticize people for having too fickle friendships, but you can't criticize them for not having enough, because
Yeah.
it's a super open, inclusive environment. Singapore's harder, right? We just have to be blunt and honest about that. Like, I love Singaporeans. I love everybody that I've had the privilege of working with the past few years. And I think that ultimately, like, my view as an outsider is that Singaporeans are some of the most trustworthy people you're ever going to meet. And I appreciate the hell out of that. But also, relationships develop much more slowly. And so creating that kind of social fabric and framework to get more connections happening, get people socializing, get people working together, building a job board so that people can post their roles and easier to find roles at Singaporean companies. Even one thing that I'm very proud of is that we were part of an effort with HQ, with EDB Singapore, with the Singapore FinTech Association to put together a report called the On-Chain State. And you can all see it at onchainstate.sg, that actually looks at how many people work in the crypto sector in Singapore, how many companies are based here, and the impact of the crypto sector on the Singaporean economy. Crypto has turbocharged the Singaporean technology ecosystem, and it's turned Singapore into a really amazing top tier hub, both for crypto companies and just for tech companies in general. But we were part of this effort to try to just like get real numbers behind it, because if we want to go and talk to ICA about what are ways we can make the Entrepass visa program better for founders, or talk to the Ministry of Manpower about what are ways we can develop the best crypto talent in Singapore. We've got to also be able to show that we're meaningfully contributing to the Singaporean economy, and that we're doing our part as an industry to kind of improve that social fabric. So it's been a totally side effort, and sometimes we have Airfoil come in and do some cool graphics and stuff like that. But it's also just been really rewarding to see. We're now at about 450 members in Singapore. So yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. And I know that in the last couple of minutes here, I want to ask you just two simple. One is a question, and another just an invitation. Anything else that you want to bring to tell people a little bit about where they can find you, projects out there, how they can reach you. Before that, what's next? What's next for you? What's next for Airfoil in 2025 and beyond, for the industry as well?
Yeah. What's next for Air? I get the question, like, what's new at Airfoil? And I'm kind of just like, we're just trying to like deal with what we have and like and do a good job. And I'm always very focused on like, oh, we're launching the site in 3 weeks and we got to make sure we're ready for it.
Yeah.
So honestly, for us, we'll probably scale a little bit this year. I'm just really excited to work with great founders and to we got a lot of very cool projects in the pipeline. The other thing would be, oh yeah, people want to connect with me. I'm on X at x.com/Phil Hedayatnia. I've checked my DMs. Always happy to do, like, on one hand, I'm of course always happy to talk with founders that might be interested in working with us, but I also am always happy to just provide some feedback. So if you're working on something, I have a profile on time.fun at time.fun/Phil, and you can actually send designs you're working on or decks that you're working on, etc. And I'm always happy to go provide a little bit of feedback and help out how I can. And of course, if any of you are coming to Singapore, whether it's token or for any other reason, hit me up. I'm happy to make some intros and kind of welcome you to the community as best I can.
Awesome, awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Phil Hedayatnia with Airfoil. What a wonderful time. Phil, thank you so much. And we shall see you all on this very podcast in the future episodes. Phil, thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.